Well, education is our first panel. And possibly the reason, we put this first because the world is a one-room schoolhouse. That maybe it's actually, can you hear me, Pam?
I can.
Okay. So possibly, let's see if this is working. It's the changing nature of learning that's having a major effect on libraries and schools. The fact that we can learn anywhere, the fact that we can use YouTube and other devices to get ourselves self-directed in learning. And this whole change in Generation Z, which is 25% of the population is under 19. What? And they're called Generation Z. And looking at their likes and dislikes, it looks like 76% of them wish their hobbies would turn into full-time jobs, compared to 50% of millennials. Which explains why all these accelerators are getting all these young people who are coming with startups. They can't even meet the needs of the number of kids who are trying to start up companies and businesses. 80% of high school students believe they're more driven than their peers. 72% of high school students want to start their own business someday. So look at the difference between millennials and Generation Z. Millennials, 2 screens. Generation Z, 5 screens. They communicate with images. Now the millennials did communicate with images, but now images are like essential. That's how people are communicating and learning. They want to create things. And the millennials wanted to share, but now they really want to get into building and making. They're future-focused rather than focused on the present. They're realists rather than optimists. And they want to work for success. It's a change. And the millennials want to be discovered, but they're really into working for success. So it's this new learning culture that's also driving our entering into this DIY and maker movement. I think this can't be forgotten, at least for me. It's such an important part of the base of the maker movement, which is the right, if you own something, the right to be able to go inside of it and to manage it, which is why open source is having such a major impact. Of course, with David raising all the wonderful issues of intellectual property that open source brings, we are in this new world. If you think of Wikipedia and the open source nature of Wikipedia and Britannica not being around, if you think of an open source catalog where we could go in and David could go in and correct the information in that MARC record, right? Shouldn't that be the way it is? It just seems so natural when David showed that. He should be able to go in and fix it, just like we can fix things in Wikipedia. And most of it is controlled well. So I wanted to just, a lot of the things that are being discussed in academic libraries, in school libraries, are related to not just the art part of the maker movement, but this part of us desiring to understand how our environment works and to be connected again to the things that we use and be able to fix them ourselves, or at least find someone who can fix them, who wants to fix them. So we are fortunate this morning to have with us representatives from academic, school, and public libraries. We have 2 who are on Skype right now, who I'll introduce, and we have 3 in person. And the way we're going to run the panel is we're going to have our speakers come down and actually stand at the podium and present. And then in the end, we'll actually sit, the panel will sit at the chairs and we'll have conversations. So be thinking of questions, because really this is the discussion part. After this panel, ask. It's time to ask and see what they think about how it applies to your library, to your situation. So hopefully you'll have some good questions at the end. So Dr. Mary Brown from Southern, no, you're not coming up first, I just want to introduce you. As you know this morning, she's a partner. She actually has been involved in the external evaluation and involved with Margaret and Bonnie here at the library in terms of collecting data. And she's going to talk about education from the point of view of Southern and library science and arts and sciences. And then we have Aimee Shuhart, who was the library media specialist here at King's Highway School, extraordinaire, who now is managing the Weston Middle School Library and has made transformations there in a very short time, and has a MakerSpace, something like a MakerSpace that she'll tell you about. And David Loertscher, who is, to me, the father of school library media. He has made and continues to make and continues to think at a high level to make changes in making libraries places for learning, for thinking, for sharing, for much more in a learning commons situation than was ever thought about before for school libraries. And it extends to public libraries. So he'll be talking, he's a professor at San Jose University, and he is the editor of Teacher Librarian and the publisher of High Willow Press, the owner of High Willow Press, so he's involved in every nook and cranny of the business. And he's going to be our first speaker. And we have on Skype, we just switched now, Mark Mathias, who I talked to you about earlier, our Board of Education member here in Westport, who is a tinkerer and a technology guru, who started a company called Remarkable Steam. He's going to talk about his involvement and his founding of the Maker Faire. And here is Dr. Pamela, Dr. Pamela Moran, who I met at an IMLS event down at the Capitol. I was on a panel, and she was the first speaker. And my jaw fell when she started talking about what's going on in Albemarle County in Virginia, where she's the superintendent of schools. And we were fortunate that she was able to Skype in today. She'll be in New York at the World Maker Faire tomorrow and on Saturday. We might get to see her on Saturday. But the videos, please go to that page I told you about this morning and take a look at her Learning Commons video. That is the first link on that page. There's two great links. So I'm going to do a share, Mark and Pam, so that you can see the slides that are being shown. So we're going to go back into Skype for a second here. And it's so nice when, so we're going to share the screens. When you talk, Pam, I'm going to turn it back over to you, so I'll stop sharing screens then. Okay? So, are you seeing the screen now? Yes? Okay, we lost your voice. All right. Okay. Let's see if I get you. This happened to us at just a second. We have a problem cable here. There we go. Can you talk again? Pam? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, there we go. Hopefully we'll get it back. Could you get that, Alex, could you grab that cable? Did you grab the cable from Alex? Okay, we'll try that later. Let's see. Switching cables. So one quick cable change here. There we go. Cable. Cable. Can you talk?
Yes.
Okay. I think that did it. All right. Mary. Mary is going to be our first speaker. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Let's welcome Mary Brown. Yes, you can just move forward.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, okay. Yesterday's New York Times. I have to, you can't hear me?
No, they have to use your mic for the video purposes too.
All right. Yesterday's New York Times had a headline, "Education gap between rich and poor is growing wider." There is a pressing need for every citizen, whether rich or poor, old or young, to be well prepared for learning and to be productive contributors of their communities. Data supports that MakerSpaces as a means to accomplish this. To be prepared for learning and productivity in the future, for which we cannot predict or imagine the problems we will face, let alone how to solve them, we need the ability to see things differently. We need the ability to exercise creativity. Research has found that structures of formalized education, observation, evaluation, competition, regulation are also the main killers of creativity. Creativity is fostered through self-directed, inquiry-based learning and opportunities involving real-world problem-solving that crosses disciplinary lines. Creativity is fostered through making. Historically, libraries were designed to play an important role in the self-directed education of their communities. The majority of surveyed Americans acknowledge that libraries do play an important role in their communities, and they look forward, or they look expectantly toward their libraries for materials and resources that can give everyone the chance to learn to succeed. To create opportunities for current and future librarians to be aware of the values of making and how these values are supporting this, isn't this horrible? All right, are supporting the mission of the library. Southern's Library School incorporated concepts of making into courses in the library curriculum. Surveys of the students, I think some people here were in that. Almost 90% felt that learning through doing in a social environment encourages creativity, and that libraries are a viable space for facilitating making and tinkering as a means to learn by doing. Over 80% reported that they had incorporated the values of making into their philosophies of library service. And many reported having applied the concepts of making in practice. In summer of 2014, Southern's Library School hosted MakerSpace 2.0, and I think some of you were in that as well. It was a one-week institute that carried graduate course credit and funding for scholarships through the IMLS Grant to Westport Library. Participants came from and were headed to jobs in public, academic, and school libraries, and I believe you'll be hearing tomorrow from one of them who turned her experience into research and is going to report on what she found with makerspaces in academic libraries. The institute included hands-on labs and presentations, including properties of inventing, stop-action filming, squishy circuits, robotics, 3D printing, wearable technology, soldering, paper art, scratch, makey-makey, computer programming education, community makerspace, and design thinking stations. And they also did a major presentation all within a week, and some of them were staying well into the evening to work on those. Students' comments included, the Institute has opened my eyes to this movement. I will definitely be pushing for making in my library. I have some of the tools now in my library, and now I know how to use them. I feel confident that I can help in moving my library into the future. Westport Library's Makerspace has been a shining example of how a little maker spirit and a few tools, because you don't have a huge number, can help turn around people's lives. We have seen people who have been downsized come and learn new skills, and people who have actually created things that have filed for patents. We have seen people from communities that lack resources come here and learn new skills, meet people from actually a different socioeconomic group, and improve the well-being of themselves, their families, and their communities. And we have seen that it also nourishes the innate creativity of the young, which again disappears after they enter formalized education. We need to continue expanding the resources and services of libraries to match the evolving needs of our communities. This is an exciting time for libraries in Connecticut, and providing the materials and tools of making and their associated services are well within the scope, as we heard, and charge of library service, and it needs to be part of the valuable services that are offered in Connecticut libraries. Okay, there you go, I cut it. Okay, and I forgot to keep doing this. By the way, this is coming from a new research project.
Thank you, Mary. So David is bringing something pretty exciting to us. He has been working on virtual makerspaces, and there's applicability, I think, to every kind of library. So, welcome, David.
Okay. I noticed today in the, as we came in, there was a case of water bottles ready to pass out. I think the predominant thing in education today is that every teacher in the country is given a whole bunch of students with exactly the same size of empty water bottles, and your task is to fill them right to the top. And that is a very dangerous notion, I think, because what we get out of that sort of education is a whole bunch of robots. About a decade ago, when I was trying to revise, put out the third edition of my taxonomy of the school library, it dawned on me that because of the internet and all of the kinds of things going on there, it was just impossible to revise that book. And so a colleague of mine, we worked on a book called the New Learning Commons, where learners win. Where learners win. And so many school libraries today, you go in and 80% of the floor space is taken up with bookshelves, and so there's hardly any room to do anything except to have one class in doing some kind of research project, and that's the end. But so everybody's been really interested in just trying to do something with a physical facility and thinking if we open it up, you know, if it doesn't move, does it really belong there? Just spaces where kids can do all sorts of things, from video to audio to construction making, doing that sort of thing alongside various instructional things going on in the place. And that's been exciting. But it dawned on us that there's a whole other world, and that's called the virtual world, that most of our kids are in today. Aimee, would you come? Let's see, there's a little clicker here. And so a couple of years ago, I came up here to Connecticut, and Bill, Leslie Preddy and I went to the Maker Faire, New York Maker Faire, which we're going to on Saturday. And after we got through with that, it dawned on us, we've got to make a model of what a true maker looks like. What is the difference between consuming knowledge and creating knowledge? And so this poster demonstrates the idea that you get, all of us are users of all kinds of technology, but if we start getting uncomfortable with how it was built and how it was, that we should use it that way, we go into kind of start to tinker with that particular technology that we're using. And then if we get really serious, we go into a phase called where we're experimenting around. So we get serious as a makerspace. And finally we get into the star over here to the right, where we have really created something new and innovative for them. And all along the path down to the lower right, you see we're developing all kinds of dispositions that come with the territory of being a creator and a maker. So that's a very exciting thing. And we put this thing to work in what we call the virtual learning commons. So most every library has some sort of a website. And what it is just a one-way street of me the expert, giving to you what you need. The OPAC, the databases, all of that sort of thing. But suppose we flip that, and the virtual learning commons becomes this very participatory community. So the students of San Jose State University and I have created templates that can be drawn down for elementary, middle, and high school, they're Google Sites. And in our rooms, and there's knowledge building centers, and there's school culture, and there's all sorts of things. And everybody in the school has an obligation to come in here and contribute and build and construct this virtual learning space. And most recently, just in the last week, my students have taken one of the rooms of the Virtual Learning Commons. It's now called the Design Hall. And in that, it's that we place what we call the virtual makerspace. So many people have a tough time getting the physical makerspace going because it requires money, it requires tools, it requires space, it requires tables, it requires soldering irons and all of that sort of stuff. But it dawned on us that we can start almost immediately in building a virtual makerspace where suddenly 24/7 the entire community can come into this place, and there's all kinds of things to do, build, create, make, all sorts of things. And so we have just developed, and if any of you want the secret to it, I'll be working with it with my group later, but we're going to unveil it really in the next couple of weeks. So I can't let you in right now, but these are Symbaloo web mixes. And what they are, so we've got them created K3, grades 4, 6, etc., up through adults. And in each one of them, we try to decide what kind of tool would help people create, build, etc., without a test at the end. So if it has a test, or if it's trying to teach you something to pass some kind of test or do an assignment, it doesn't belong here. It's a creative kind of space. For example, Roblox in Minecraft, where you can build and construct your own games and then get other people to play your games. So if you think of places like, instead of just reading a book, in the virtual makerspace, we learn to write books. So it's not watching videos, it's creating videos. So I think there's a whole brand new idea of creating these virtual spaces that can reach everyone and serve everybody on a different level, and that's called making. Thank you.
Here, how about that? You'll see, it'll be, if you want to, during your slide, if it's covering something, just move them around. Thank you, David. That was great. And now Aimee is going to talk about her experience with her Learning Commons and her Innovation Lab at the Weston Middle School.
Good morning. This is my third year at Weston Middle School, but my 15th year as a school librarian. And I'm not really sure what I'm doing here, except that when Bill said, "Can you?" I said yes. So I humbly share the work of which that I am really so proud. And I'm using this remote, right?
Click on the screen first. Just click on the screen. Right on the PowerPoint. And then use the remote. Now go ahead.
There we go. So I was very fortunate when I got to my current school, Weston Middle School, because I was really blessed with a blank slate. The school library had recently been renovated. It was, new rugs, new shelving, very open space with glass-paneled rooms on either side of the library. And so I had a gift to come in 2 years ago and basically build it from scratch. And you don't always get that opportunity. So this was unique, and I wanted to really make the most of it. I realized very quickly that the two paths to success would be to reach outside the walls of the library and build as many partnerships as I could, as well as to have a vision. And my vision really is something very, very flexible. The vision for my Library Learning Commons is to strive toward a state of perpetual beta. I don't ever want to be in a place where I've made decisions that I have made decisions set in stone. The decisions that shape our Library Learning Commons are made by students primarily, a body of teachers that help contribute to the decisions. So everybody's probably familiar with this phrase, but it's one that I cling to as being foundational for me. And we heard from David already about the paradigm shifting that's going on, which isn't a new concept, but it also is, these are the guiding principles that shape the decisions that occur at Weston Middle School. So they also help me to stay really true to that vision of perpetual beta. If I want my users or allies to go from just accessing knowledge to actually creating something, if I want them to move into that action phase where they really own it, I have to remember that perpetual beta is the key to that. So why school libraries? Every decision that we make really is shaped by one sort of foundational question. Does the program, service, whatever it is, does it put students at the heart of their learning? If the answer is no, then we don't do it. If the answer is yes, we move forward. So a picture that you can see here is just the Cardboard Challenge, which we started last year, the Global Cardboard Challenge movement, which was like, kids were like rabid for cardboard. They couldn't wait to get in and play with cardboard. And we're about to embark on our second Cardboard Challenge next week. So we're pretty excited about that. Another critical concept is the idea of social and collaborative and peer-led learning. I was really happy to hear and very reassured to hear David say that we don't have to be the greedy librarians, because we've done things like Arduino workshops and Raspberry Pi workshops, and I know nothing about that. I find people who do, and I bring them in, and they train the students, and eventually I try to learn from my students, but the whole idea of peer-assisted and peer-led and expertise that comes from my students is what we're striving toward. So one example of that is the Take It Apart station, which has been, again, an amazingly transformative, simple piece of our MakerSpace, which is an old piece of technology that could be working or could be broken. And students are given a range of tools in which they're charged to progressively take it apart. And some students really want to get in there and fix it, and some students just want to explore and see what's on the inside of it. But really, I'm the facilitator on the side. I have lots of students who feel like my tools are not adequate, so they're providing some guidance about what tools we should be purchasing next for our next Take It Apart. Again, this idea of student ownership is critical, but so is the idea of not everything is high tech. The Cardboard Challenge was a pretty low tech activity, although one group did actually program an Arduino board in their vending machine so that when the cans of Switch dispensed from the cardboard, the Arduino would light up with an LED panel. But then we had some very simple. This idea was very low tech. This was a partnership that a student came up with, and a student found out about the Students Rebuild Literacy Challenge hosted through Save the Children. Very simple, very low tech, making bookmarks. Each bookmark raised $2 towards Save the Children. Students were coming in at recess to make bookmarks and send them to Save the Children. So again, the idea that it has to be owned by the students is key. I know many of us already know the concept of growth mindset. I really like the modification of that by George Couros, who talks about the innovator's mindset. And it's something that guides our library learning commons, and the idea that everybody can be a maker. It's not really just for the middle-aged white guys, it's for everybody. And that you're not predisposed to having certain genes that allow you to get involved. So the key piece of this here is that if I believe this, that's great, but the idea really can't live and die with me alone, or else it will not be successful. I have to get buy-in from others. So the digital, I'm going to talk very quickly because I'm running out of time. The Digital Warrior team, our school mascot is the Warriors, that's why we're the Digital Warriors. It's kind of my student advisory board. It's a club, but they really advise and make most of the decisions in the library. There's an innovation committee, which is a representation of a cross-section of staff, grade levels, and content areas that get involved to also make decisions. We actually had our first meeting at the Westport Public Library last year. We toured the amazing MakerSpace here. We did some hands-on workshops, and we started just thinking about what does innovation look like in school? How can we harness the creativity that already exists? Quick shout out to Donors Choose, because that's another partnership. I got my MakerBot printer from them for $95. And the work that exists from David Loertscher, that Fran Compar is doing here in the state, you know, so many resources are out there, and it's really about kind of reaching out to grab a hold of those and bring it back, and as we heard David also say, make it unique and make it reflect your community. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Aimee. Mark, I'm going to have you go next, because instead of resharing the slides again, we'll have you go. If you can just give me a thumbs up or something when you want to go forward with the slides, I'll move them forward. Okay?
Great. Can you guys hear me now?
Yes.
Can you turn it down?
Great.
Yeah, it's too loud.
Thanks, everyone, for being here today. I'm going to use the world's longest remote control and have Bill do the advancing of the slides for me. And it looks like it even works. Again, the topic here, just a little bit about me. I think Bill mentioned he talked to you a little bit about me. I am a member of the Westport Board of Education, have been for 12 years. Just to make this clear, I am not speaking on behalf of the Board of Education, these official statements I'm making. But I also was involved and founded and co-chaired the past 4 Westport Mini Maker Fairs, and of course we're ramping up for the 5th annual event, which will be next year. And I started a company called Remarkable Steam, that's actually the financial arm that supports and funds these, among other activities. So next slide, please, Bill. In my experience, there were really 4 things that mattered here that have involved libraries and education. I'll talk about them separately: inspiration, community involvement, partnership, and collaboration. And Bill, next slide, please. One of the things that has amazed me about this is, I know when Bill and I first talked about putting on a Maker Fair, which was Connecticut's first Maker Fair at the time, we never knew what this thing was going to be. The tale that we tell is, we said, let's plan for about a small event of about 800 people. If no one shows up, we sweep it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen. But in fact, that first event that we had attracted 2,200 people when we planned for 800. It's now become the largest event in Westport, bar none. It's the largest event in Connecticut focused on creativity and innovation. We're actually one of the top 10% in terms of attendance of mini maker fairs worldwide. And we're one of the few that's actually free. But what's interesting to me is how it has inspired our entire community through the annual event, and in particular what the library has done, which is continuing those activities on an ongoing basis. Pretty much every week there are specific events that are announced that occur in the library, and ongoing ones that just appear, like the MakerSpace is open every day. And so it's a really excellent tool to continue the interest in the community year round. Another kind of outcome that we have here was that there was a STEM curriculum that resulted from really community interest. I, as a Board of Education member, was not actually involved in the STEM curriculum in terms of it coming towards to us as an item to vote on, but yet it was the inspiration of the community, of the teachers, of the parents, of the students that accelerated that. I think it would have happened eventually, but I think it was the inspiration that we had through the Maker Fairs and through the library's involvement that actually accelerated that quite dramatically. Next slide, please, Bill. Again, community involvement. What's been interesting to me is that through the MakerSpace and the ongoing programs, the library has really raised its level of presence in the community. And by the way, for those of you that know, the Westport Library has always had a very, very prominent presence in the community. But the MakerSpace and the ongoing programs has truly changed its interaction with the community, the demographics. I'm sure Bill and Bill Harmer can talk about that more. But the people that come to the library has dramatically changed. And what's been interesting to me is that the library has become an experiential place over a broad demographic. And so the I know when I moved to town 14 years ago, we were very impressed that the library had a video lending library, and that was a very impressive thing at the time. But what it is expanded to in terms of other programs, and in particular the whole maker community, has been just inspirational and been great for the community. Next slide, please, Bill. The partnership, we developed great partnerships. Partners from the school, teachers from the schools are working with the library. Activities at school are ending up in the library and vice versa, things that are starting at the library and making ways into the schools. And what we're finding is that our learning in the community is going far beyond the walls of our school system. It's ending up in the library, and the library is supporting the learning that we're having. So we're finding that this partnership between schools and libraries has really grown over the past few years. Again, it's always been great, but if I had to wager a number, I would say it's 3 to 5 times the involvement in terms of partnership and interest from students wanting to do things and the libraries providing the facilities and the opportunities for them to do that. Next slide, Bill. The collaboration. Again, there's been a lot of collaboration. The community, the library has become a focal point for collaboration on town groups, schools, teachers, students, parents, clubs, organizations. They're all doing things at the library, and many of them relate back to the education that's going on. And many are completely outside of whatever curriculum the students are learning in the schools. Again, I mentioned this education continued to pass the boundaries, and the library has become a great location for lifelong learners. For those people that are not actually taking classes, they can still come to the library, and beyond the traditional level of books and other activities, they're given hands-on learning. It's been just a hugely popular and successful endeavor for all of us. So I wanted to thank, in particular, Bill for his support of this. And as I'm sure many of you know, Bill is leaving the library in the next month or so, and we will certainly miss him from the time that we've worked with him. And I want to personally thank him for all he's done to help the library be a part of the community and for his support of the Maker Bears.
Thank you, Mark. We're going to, I think that extra sound, was coming from maybe Dr. Moran's office.
I don't think so.
No? So, isn't that interesting? We're giving you a Generation Z experience where you can filter through 5 different auditory pieces that are coming in. The one, because somehow we were able to get all of your words and it was very clear, Mark, even though we had another conversation in the background that was coming through. So thank you very much. That was excellent. So now I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to switch over to you, Pam. I already gave an introduction. Let me get you full screen here. There we go. And let's hear about what you're doing in Virginia in the schools.
Okay. And the first thing I'm going to do is to put my 5-minute stopwatch on so that I can try to monitor myself here, Bill.
You got that.
But I'd like to just start by saying that I'm superintendent of Albemarle County Public Schools, and I started out in 1975 as a science teacher in a middle school not too far from here, and have kind of moved up through the ranks. Have been worked as a teacher at every level: high school, middle school, elementary, staff development coordinator. I've been an assistant principal, a principal, a curriculum director, assistant superintendent, and now superintendent. So I've lived a long life of jobs in education. But one of the things that really has caught my attention, probably starting in the last 4 or 5 years, as I've been occasionally on the road doing some work out across the country, is that it started to catch my attention that while we were really trying to facilitate libraries through a transition to become even more robust spaces in our schools, that I was hearing stories, horror stories about school divisions on the West Coast, East Coast, in different parts of the country, closing libraries, saying that libraries had no place in the world of schools anymore, that librarians would be better utilized as reading specialists and so forth and so on. And that really, I think, caught my attention in a way that I found it very horrifying, and started to really speak out on behalf of both public libraries and public school libraries as being incredible anchors for continued learning in any community across the country as well as the world. And it goes back to my roots, and I have to laugh and say that I think that my first librarian that I really knew well was in my public library in a little teeny tiny town in the low country of South Carolina. Her name was Miss Hooten, And Miss Hooten was, in my opinion, quite elderly, although probably not nearly as old as I thought she was at that time when I was just in my single digits. But one of the things that really struck me is I've been reflecting on the best of what librarians have always done. I always go back to Miss Hooten because she really turned me on to reading and gave books to me at a time when I was living on a tiny farm in the low country and not really having much awareness of the outside world. But I remember one time I was in there and she mentioned something to me about an upcoming solar eclipse. And it was fascinating because, you know, we started talking about it and I wanted to know, well, how do you get to see a solar eclipse? And she went to look for a book for me and realized that she did not have one. And it was right at the point where libraries started to form more regional or conglomerate sort of library systems in the country, and she said, oh my, I can go to Aiken, I can send a request to Aiken and see if they have a book. And so she was able to reach out, get a book, sit down with me, I read it, we figured out what I would be able to do in order to see this upcoming solar eclipse. And I believe she even gave me some cardboard boxes to help me construct this little device to go do it. So in some ways, I have to say that I think that Miss Hooten was maybe one of that generation of librarians who saw herself as contributing to making while also contributing to the literacy of kids in this little low country town. But I use that as an example because I think that one of the things I realized from Miss Hooten is that she didn't define libraries in that traditional sense of being spaces where people, you know, you've got books that get written, they get printed, they get put on shelves, people come in, they grab a book, or a magazine or whatever it is, they sit down, read it or listen to it, try to remember what's in it and walk out. But that she really was starting to be a person who was thinking about the idea of libraries as places or spaces where people search, connect, communicate, and make. And so when I hear David talking about the virtual nature of makerspaces or listen to Mark talking about or Aimee talking about hand. It strikes me that that is perhaps not just going back to our roots, but adding a new layer to this next generation of opportunities that our kids have in libraries. So we started about 6 years ago, and I had a great librarian in Albemarle County at one of our high schools, Joan Ackroyd, who started pitching up the idea that libraries should be more than just an archive, shush space where kids go and are expected to kind of sit quietly and use materials, and if they don't, then they need to go back to class. She said, I think that we could really expand that. And we went down that path and started looking at changes in space. We did real redesigns to create different kinds of spaces in the library. We started talking about what other kinds of things could be added to the library. She actually cleaned out her office and said, I want to turn this into a studio space where kids can do music construction. We had borrowed that from the Chicago Children's Library. And the reality is that as we started to build that out, we realized that it wasn't just about that one library where we were trying to create hacker spaces and poetry cafes and so forth and so on, but really trying to go after how do we do that in 26 school libraries, elementary, middle, and high school. So we really went down that path of transforming libraries to learning commons. Today you can walk into our libraries. I walked into Albemarle High School Library recently, and there's some kids in there with a sewing machine. They're on YouTube trying to figure out how do you thread a needle with the idea that they wanted to make some things for themselves, and were able to use YouTube. So they were going into that virtual world. They were using the physical environment. There are places where kids can work very quietly. There are places where kids are doing design work. We have Genius Bars so that people can come in with tech questions and talk to high school kids and help get problems solved. It's not unusual to see a 3D printer working pretty much full speed ahead during the day on projects that kids are sending to the library from their classes. And so one of the things I realized is that as we started to look at the data, all of a sudden I realized our libraries had gone from places where you saw a few kids who probably were like me when I was a kid, loved the library, loved the books, and that was what got us through the door, to being spaces where kids were coming through the door in order to be able to really do that search, connect, communicate, make model. And all of a sudden we realized as we were looking around our libraries, there were kids there that would probably never choose to be there if it was libraries circa 1995. So at some level, what I'm seeing as we move into this next generation of work, both virtually and physically, that our libraries are really becoming what I call a disruptive innovation, because we're seeing not just incremental, but exponential increases in the number of kids taking materials out of the library, using the resources that are there, going into the library, teachers taking classes in there to do work that 10 years ago they weren't taking kids to do. So, and librarians reaching out to the classroom teachers, reaching out to kids and figuring out how is it that we are really creating what Pascal Fennec calls a global communication network where kids are able to both access resources and expertise from people all over the world in order to do things that they're both interested in, passionate in, and are expected to learn in schools. So for me, I see our librarians as being people who are creating thriving spaces where all of our kids, even kids that we never sometimes expect to see in the library, are coming and saying, this is the coolest place in the school to be, and this is the kind of work that I want to be doing. So I would just say that as a superintendent, I think that we always need to step up and ask the question, what are the best of things that we've always done? What are the things that we want to add and continue to do, as Aimee said, the beta work, in order to be able to move ourselves forward? And so I would just leave you with the idea that makerspaces have a wonderful place in our schools, everywhere. Librarians can be real leaders for the work that I believe really anchors libraries today, and that's the search, connect, communicate, make model, more so than the one that we were in 25 years ago. So I'm going to end there.
Wow, okay, what a panel. And what we want to do now is open it up for your questions. Both Mark and Pam are staying on so that they could communicate with us. And there's that other voice. So, does anyone have a question to start? I'll start if no one does. Okay, let's see. David, I'll give you a microphone. There's microphones up on the chair. If you want to go up there, they can pass you the mic, or you can pass them the mic right there. Okay. I know that you've been working all over Canada and America, and do you have any examples where public libraries are working closely with Learning Commons, or any ideas on how public libraries can work more closely with schools in the Learning Commons model?
I think,
No, it's on. You just have to be close. It's on. It's on.
Let's see. It's on? It's
Yeah.
on? This is on? Well, I think collaboration is really what it's all about today, particularly in the virtual world. So I talked about virtual learning commons, and why not combine the school library virtual learning commons with the public library one, so that you get a whole community working together, whether it's in school or out of school, whether it's 10 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock at night, whether it's in a physical space or on my iPhone. So I think we need to start erasing the walls between institutions and people, and just and that can be done easier in the virtual world because of all the collaborative technologies that are there. Than in the physical world. So you don't have to bring the whole class to the public library, you're there.
Hi, I'm a high school library media specialist, so my question is for Aimee. The things that the students were doing, are those done collaboratively with your curriculum, or are these outside of your curriculum? And how are you facilitating them? Is this before school, after school? I know you mentioned recess, but can you just be a little bit more specific about how you've put all this together? We're in the process of putting together a makerspace at East Haven High School, and I know there's not one fit, for everything, but I just would appreciate any ideas.
So the key to your question is the schedule.
the middle school is on a very rigid schedule. Students do not have a lot of flexibility to use the library independently throughout the day. So the way that I get around that is before school, after school, and at lunch and recess. And then as teachers start to see student excitement, that sort of builds this organic way of teachers saying, how could I fit this into my curriculum? The activities that I highlighted and several more are not necessarily tied to any curriculum standard per se. However, that being said, everything that students are doing is part of some either habit of mind, disposition, or curriculum standard. And particularly with the new science standards and the new social studies next generation standards, there's a lot of inquiry-based approaches. So as teachers see students' excitement, as students are coming back to the classroom sharing what they did, teachers are getting more excited and are starting to schedule more whole class visits to utilize some of these resources and activities. If that helps you.
I wonder if I could interrupt that one. I think if a class is assigned to the library for fixed schedules, that should be making time rather than instructional time. And then that releases the librarian, who doesn't have to pay attention to the 30 kids that are busy making and doing, etc., to do collaborative kinds of really great learning experiences with kids. So you have to worry about this fixed flex schedule problem, and I think there's a solution.
And Pam, I'm sure you could comment on this because the video that we saw this morning of your high school learning commons was pretty amazing.
Well, absolutely. I would say that what we've really discovered is that as our kids are finding more ways to use our high school libraries, all three of them, and I would tell you that I'm going to be putting up our 3 high school librarians that are really worth talking to about some of the questions that you might have into the tweet stream for Bill and Dave and the Westport Library and Retinker, the hashtag. But one of the things that I'll tell you is that we really believe that project work is one of the key pathways that our kids use to get to learning. We also believe that making is a key pathway, as well as connectivity and interactive technologies. And there's no place in the school that better creates that environment for kids to come and connect. And I think that what we've seen is that as teachers have found more authentic, purposeful uses of libraries for kids, as kids have found that we've got much more relaxed opportunities for kids to come and go to our libraries throughout the day, versus having it be at the high school level some sort of a scheduled time or very specific to a research paper or learning how to use a particular strategy in the library. So I think that the biggest thing that I would encourage people to do is that I'm going to put Jonah Ackroyd, Melissa Techman, and Erica Thorson out there as possible people that you might connect with. If you have follow-up questions, we've got high school librarians, middle school librarians, and elementary librarians on Twitter. And that's one of the places where they say they learn the most is by connecting with other librarians that are doing the same sort of exploratory work about how do we make our libraries spaces for kids today and in contemporary ways versus trying to preserve the libraries of 1995. So look for that in the tweet stream if you're on Twitter.
Excellent.
Pam also just reminded me when she said the word choice, another key piece of this is making sure that as a school library media specialist, you're part of curriculum design work. Because if you can get into curriculum design work, one of the things that you can really have an influence on is the end product of student learning, which really should be student choice. So David's earliest, most influential piece of work on me was Ban Those Birds. So when students are doing a bird report, they're not all making a trifold about their state bird. When students learn content, they are given the choice of how to represent what they've learned. And in our makerspaces, in our learning commons, we are about student choice. So if you can be a part of curriculum design and kind of work from that backward design model, that can be very, very powerful.
Yes, let me give you this.
Does she have their Twitter handles?
Pam,
Yes.
the Twitter handles.
At Pam Moran.
And that would be just for you.
I think
What
just
about
tweeting
the
your
other
estimates
And she's going to tweet the rest of them. So once she puts out that tweet, you'll have everybody. Our hashtag for today is hashtag Retinker. So if you want to add that to a tweet that you make, then we can search on the conversation on Retinker. Mark, can you hear Mark?
I am here, yes.
Okay. I have a question. Because having been in schools for so many years, and I often talk about the closed system of schools versus the open system of the school library, and understanding security issues and safety issues, but also thinking that maybe school systems are looking for opportunities to be more open source. How do you see, with all the safety issues, all of the curriculum issues, all the closed issues, how do you see possible future opportunities for libraries to become allies with schools, the public libraries to become allies?
Boy, how much time do I have, Bill?
A minute.
A minute.
Or two.
I think one of the challenges, I think you or somebody else had brushed upon this earlier, is when you have this collaborative environment, it's all well and good that people collaborate on things, but then you always have people that are perhaps not as high-minded or want to, ensure that the best information is there if they want to skew it in a particular way. So I think that there are challenges with having things open source. I do like the idea of, I've always believed that sunshine and fresh air are really good ways to make sure that you have transparency in an organization. That's an evolving area, Bill. I think that what we are going to see, I think it's inevitable that we are going to see more collaboration. I think one of the things we're going to have to do is we're going to also have to have vetting processes for curriculums, for example. You're going to have qualifications, things like that. And it's an exciting area, one that is certainly not well defined, and I would be remiss in indicating that I had the answer there.
Right. Well, I think that the fact that you're on the board and that you're thinking about that is really important. I think that we are lucky in Westport that you're on the board and that we have these connections and that I was in the school system, but I think other public libraries need opportunities to make those kinds of connections so that you have more of an ability to influence the teachers, and not influence as much as just be a real part of the educational system in the schools. And it's not that easy. Do you have any other questions?
And Bill, can I just add something to that?
Yes.
I think what's been interesting for me is that, as I think we've seen over the past few years, is the rise of the prominence of the library in Westport has really been, it's not been a top-down push where the Board of Education says, this is what we want. It's been the community at large that said, this is what we want. And it's been nice that those things have been in concert with each other, but it's a matter of, there's been a kind of a grassroots effort, a community effort, and community interest that has driven this, rather than we on the board trying to mandate that. So it's been, I think, as more communities can have that cooperative approach, I think we're going to see some very, very powerful outcomes.
Right. I think you're right. I mean, one thing that maybe not everybody in here knows is that after we had our 3D printers in for a while, we found out that the middle schools had a sign up that said, in order to use the 3D printer here, you must first be trained at the library. That was like a gift. It happened sideways, like Mark just said. We didn't plan it. If we probably tried to plan it, it wouldn't work. But it was the sideways. They saw it as value. And they said, oh, you get trained there. So we have little certificates that we make up.
And Bill, one of the things, can I add just one more item too?
Yeah.
One of the things that, when we went down this path 4 years ago, I don't think anyone anticipated what the stirring of the pot would have yielded. I don't think either of us anticipated that the library would have makerspaces, that you'd be having conferences, that the attraction would be as wide and as broad as it has been. And I guess my comment is, I encourage people that are listening and watching to stir that pot. The risks are relatively low and the rewards are remarkably high by doing so.
Hi, I'm Cindy Schofield. I'm from Southern Connecticut State University, and we're developing a place in our academic library, partly to reach every student. We have space, and we also have, I guess, a Tinker circulating collection. But we also, of course, are in the teacher training business and the librarian training business, the school library training business. So for those in-service programs, is there anything especially Pam and Aimee that you can think of that we really have to have in our space in order to adequately send out new teachers and new librarians?
Aimee, do you want to speak to that first?
I think I need to think about that for a minute. And the reason is because I think it's a habit of mine, it's a dispositional type thing that is what you're looking for. I don't know that there's any kit or program or person that can necessarily come in and provide that. It's providing experiences that help bring out or exemplify those dispositions of taking risks and trying things and being flexible and being collaborative and reaching out. It's not really an answer, but it's what I'm thinking of right now. I don't know, Pam, if you have some other suggestions.
Well, you know, it's interesting because what I've seen is that our library started out by changing some space up and putting, I mean, most of our things have been what I call DIY. We've not put a ton of money into our library redesigns. That what we have started with is kind of the idea of what is it that we might discover that kids want to do, and then to start to move things in that represent that. So if kids are interested in music, and we find that if we put just a little bit of equipment in, that it starts to attract kids, then we've started to expand to our music construction studios. We put in the sort of the genius bar with the idea that as we were putting more technology in the hands of kids out in the schools, as well as teachers, that it would be a great way to have kids who were willing to provide some support in the library to help other people solve computer problems. And that's kind of grown into what we call our genius bars. And so people can come in and kids will do, they may be doing a workshop, kid workshop on Arduino how to use Arduinos, or something about drones. I walked into a library the other day and the librarian was trying to figure out how to hang banners from vents up in the ceiling. And it was going to take a while before building services could get there with ladders. One of the kids came in from shop class with a drone and flew the drone up over the vent tubing with a fishing line, and within 5 minutes they were hanging banners. So what I think is the most important thing is having an openness to finding out what are kids already doing, what do they want to do, and then starting to create those spaces. Some of our elementary librarians start by just doing what they call creation stations. They'll put out very simple things: cardboard, glue, scissors. The next thing I know, you've got soldering irons in there, small electrical drills, and kids are doing more sophisticated work. Our librarians also do something that I think that Mark would appreciate. We have a local MakerSpace called Tinkersmiths. Some of our folks that are at both the University of Virginia Library, as well as our own librarians and other teachers, go over there and learn from the makers, and then bring those things back and find out, hey, kids are really interested in this. But I don't think you have to really start out with this big budget and go, we got to have 3 3D printers and a laser cutter and a this and a that. I think start out with the simple tools that people have always used to make. I watched kids sewing with felt the other day and making caps for themselves in an elementary library. How cool is that? And it's like, donation stuff that people have said, here's some needles, here's some thread, here's some felt, and off the kids are. And if that turns into a really cool thing, they may have an expanded sewing center there before long. Mark, what would you add to that? It's kind of that maker
based on the
mindset.
time, we're going to have to use that as a closing moment. The moment's wrath outgrave here, and we are going to have to move on. This was an incredible panel, great information. I think we're just getting started in terms of thinking of some ideas to put together. Pam, when you mentioned community makerspaces, everyone in your packet, you have a Connecticut makers sheet that has a list of every current community makerspace. We could not have done our work without our community makerspaces. So please, we're the libraries from all over Connecticut. Take a look at your local makerspace. They can help you, as they've helped us here. So Mark and Pam and David and Aimee and Mary, thank you very much for presenting. Pam, maybe we'll see you in New York. If we're lucky, we'll get to see you in New York on Saturday.
Absolutely. We've got a crew of Albemarle educators heading up, so hope to see some folks. We'll be there.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.